behalf of the Asia-Europe Foundation and our partners for this edition of ASEF Unplugged, which are, of course, Center 42. This is the third one that we're co-organizing with them. And on this occasion, the Australian Council for the Arts. Welcome, and thank you for spending your precious Saturday with us, with the millions of events going on now in Singapore. Thank you very much, much appreciated. ASEF Unplugged is an event series that is initiated by the Asia-Europe Foundation to bring together arts communities in Asia and in Europe to spur conversations and meaningful exchanges and dialogues in small groups, not the big conference types. And we partner up with local partners when we do so. And in addition to bringing together cultural professionals in Asia and in Europe, regional connections are also of importance. In particular, the links between Southeast Asia and Australia. In 2018, we had a special call for Southeast Asian artists to come to Australia for AusAsia, where we brought nearly 20 artists there to participate in AusAsia Festival, where Borak Art Series, a Malaysian conference and platform, was held. And we had the first Unplugged there on Australia-Southeast Asia relations. Earlier this year in July, we had a second Unplugged on the same broad topic with NUS and Asia Link. And today, we are taking it a step farther, a bit deeper, with Arts Futures, which is a title borrowed from the Australian Council's research work. Comparatively, in Singapore and in Singapore and in Australia, there is a trend of declining income or limited income in the arts and culture sector. It's one of the lowest paid sectors. If I could refer to my notes. In Australia, for example, creative professionals earn 21% below the national average, and in Singapore, that same figure is set to be 11%. 81% of creative professionals in Australia are freelancers. In Singapore, the figure is set to be 47%. However, we should keep in mind that the methodologies and sample sizes, composition of the people interviewed and so on, and the research done in both countries are different. And we are here in Singapore, and people on the ground might say actually that the real number of freelancers is not actually 47%, but it might be closer to the Australian statistic. But despite all of that, most of us stay in the arts sector because of interest, passion, and a steadfast belief that we're doing something good. But the future is coming, and artists are, for example, driven to explore multiple art forms or to have jobs outside of the arts, use their creative skills outside of the arts, or to combine their artistic practice with non-art jobs. So we're here today to talk about what the future might look like, what is in store, new business models, expanding opportunities, and new working landscapes. And what does all that look like? So, also, just one more thing to add, it's also said that people in the creative sector, the creative skills, are actually less likely to be automated. So, we're less likely to be replaced by robots. So, there's actually high growth potential in our sector. But how do we harness that? And how do we work with the other sectors? How do we have a future-focused mindset? And that's why we're all here today. So we're going to talk about that, our evolving role in society, of cultural organizations, changing working landscapes, and expanding opportunities. After this talk, we'll have a short break, and after that we will have a workshop within the same framework, which will be run by Ms. Rebecca Barnett, who's right here. She's from Relative Creative, a Gold Coast-based strategic design company. I'm almost done. And so, it is my pleasure to introduce our three speakers for today. First, we have Dr. Ruth Williams, who is not here with us physically in person right now, but you will see her in a second on screen, live from Australia. And to begin with, we will play a pre-recorded video conversation, just so we're technologies might fail. Hello, Ruth. Can you hear us and see us?
Yeah, I hear you. Hi.
So Ruth is a research associate at the Australian Council for the Arts. For the past 18 months, She's been working with research fellow Dr. Rachel Perry, who developed the Arts Futures Suite of Work. And for those who don't know, but I think all of you are aware, the Australian Council for the Arts is the Australian government's principal arts funding and advisory body, and it champions Australian arts through a variety of activities, including giving grants, fellowships, and awards, advocating for the value of the arts, providing advice to the Australian government on matters relating to the arts sector, organizing capacity building activities, and of course, a very strong research model. After we show Ruth's video presentation, we will call on stage our local speakers and participants, and we have Ms Yvonne Tham, who's here in front, is the Chief Executive Officer of Esplanade. You all know what Esplanade is. Very, very big performing arts center in Singapore. Before that, she was Deputy CEO at the National Arts Councils, overseeing the strategic planning and capacity building departments. And before that, she was Director of the Arts and Heritage Division of what was then called the Ministry of Information, Communications, and the Arts, present day MCCY. And then our second local speaker is Hasyimah Harith. Hasyimah is a dance practitioner, and she's part of Prisma, which is a contemporary dance company rooted very strongly in Malay philosophy, whose aim is to bring traditional Malay dance to the international dance world, and they do productions, performances, as well as workshops. So, to kick things off, we will play Ruth's video, which will shed some light on Arts Futures, which is the foundation of our whole day. We can play it now.
Hello. Firstly, I'd like to say a big thank you to the Asia Europe Foundation and to Centre 42 for inviting me to take part in this session and to share with you some of the thinking that we're doing on Arts Futures. I'm really sorry that I can't be with you in person. In this presentation, I'd like to give you a brief introduction to the priorities of the Australia Council and our research activities before moving on to focus on the Arts Futures suite of work. My aim is to share with you some of the themes we're thinking about and the big questions that we're asking. And I'm really looking forward to hearing in the responses and the discussion session that will follow about what resonates and sparks ideas for you, what the similarities and differences are between our contexts, and what you see as the future for artists, arts and creativity. And for those of you staying on to participate in the workshop, this will hopefully help get you into a bit of a future-focused way of thinking. So as Fatima mentioned in her introduction, the Australia Council is the Australian Government's principal arts funding and advisory body. And our role is to champion and invest in Australian arts and creativity through our grant programs, through our capacity and market building work, advocacy and advice, through our partnerships and research. We've just recently launched our corporate plan for 2019 to 2023, which is titled Creativity Connects Us. And this sets out our 5 strategic objectives, which are that Australians are transformed by arts and creativity, that our arts reflect us, that First Nations arts and culture are cherished. Fourthly, that the arts and creativity are thriving. And finally, that arts and creativity are valued. Research is a core activity at the Australia Council. We have a legislative mandate to conduct and commission research about the arts and to evaluate the work and the impact of Council's work. Our research helps build knowledge and evidence about Australian arts activity and the environment in which the arts are created, distributed, and experienced. Our research supports the Council's broader role as Australia's arts funding and advisory body by providing an evidence base to inform strategic decision-making and policy development. It's also important to us that our research supports the sector, providing useful insights that have a real-world impact. And our research plays a critical role in supporting advocacy for the arts, whether that's by us as an organisation or other organisations and individuals in the wider sector. We can help provide the evidence that is so vital for effective advocacy. Our research is clustered around 5 main themes. The first theme is about public sentiment, where we consider the attitudes, values and engagement with the arts. And this work helps us to demonstrate the role and the value of the arts in Australian life. Our second research theme is artists' careers. This research enables us to advocate for artists' livelihoods, to understand the changing context of artistic practice, and to underline the place of artists in society. The third theme is Arts Futures, which I'll focus on in a moment. Fourthly, it's First Nations research. And we've been developing a suite of research in response to a gap identified in the 2013 Arts Participation Survey, a gap that was between interest in First Nations art and between actual engagement with First Nations art. We started with research on audiences. Next, we looked at the market, and we're currently working on a piece which focused on the creation of art. Our final and fifth theme is diversity. Our diversity work is largely embedded with all of our other research. We aim to report our findings by gender, age group, disability, location, and cultural background wherever possible, although this can be complex and challenging. But we've also published a range of reports on disability, regional arts, and other diversity themes. So moving on to focus on Arts Futures. Arts Futures is a body of work that developed from the results of the latest survey of professional practicing artists. This research highlighted some of the challenges faced by artists, including declining income from creative work, but it also highlighted expanding opportunities for artists in the workforce of the future. Arts Futures situates the Australian arts sector within broader systems of change and disruption, driven by technology, economics, and sociocultural processes. Arts Futures aims to ensure the challenges and opportunities of disruption can be identified, understood, and harnessed. The need to understand the role of arts and arts organisations and artists and creatives in predictive futures is embedded in the Australia Council's functions and strategic objectives, especially in our role as advocate, advisor, and capacity builder in the sector. Arts Futures moves beyond research into wider sector engagement, aiming to activate and to grow the capacity that already exists in the cultural and creative industries through sharing knowledge, experience, and networks. Within this work, we want to create conversations, to generate knowledge, and to share ideas on the future of arts and creativity. We know we don't have all the answers. We want to share our thinking as it develops and to work with others to develop new knowledge and shape future directions. We believe that the arts and culture sectors can gain strength through their intersections with and embeddedness in other sectors and industries. The Arts Futures activity will be a way of connecting people and ideas. The Arts Futures work is focused on three themes. Firstly, new and innovative business models and structures. With significant industry changes taking place both within and outside the arts and cultural sector, we need to consider what the creative or arts organisations of the future might be. Crucially, we need to understand what skills and structures are needed to develop sustainable, agile, and innovative business models that will ensure ongoing income generation and more viable artist careers. Our second theme is that we're concerned with the impact of new and emerging technologies. Artists increasingly rely on technology-driven platforms and tools to create work, to collaborate with others, and to reach audiences. But along with these new technologies comes a need to interrogate the societal structures and biases within which they are created and applied. Our work in this area explores the ethical and human rights implications of new technologies, particularly as they impact on the work of artists, arts organisations, and the broader diverse populations engaging with the arts on a daily basis. And finally, we're exploring the changing roles of artists and creativity. Arts and culture have always been central to societies across the world. By looking across history, we can explore the changing roles of artists and creativity in times of disruption and consider possible futures. And by viewing arts engagement as a continuum that includes creators, audiences, and the public, we can sometimes see a blurring of these categories. At times, this blurring is mediated by technology, and it presents new opportunities to explore the evolving roles of artists, as well as the public value of arts. Creativity is not solely held by artists or the arts. The ability to think and act creatively is embedded in what makes us human and will be increasingly important with the rise of AI and automation. So we're approaching these three themes through three main ways of working. Through targeted research projects, which are delivered either in-house or in partnership with academics and cultural organisations, through public events, and through knowledge-generating activities such as workshops, discussions, and roundtables. We have a range of projects underway and have delivered several public events and discussions so far. One of these was a wide-reaching and provocative discussion between our CEO, Adrian Collette, and visiting international consultant Stephen Wolfe on future directions for arts and culture. Stephen Wolfe described how cultural institutions are evolving from traditional presenting organisations to becoming increasingly entangled with their communities, with spaces that are dynamic and flexible, and viewing audiences as participants. We also delivered an event called The Space in Between at Vivid last year. Vivid is the largest festival of lights, music and ideas in the Southern Hemisphere, held annually in Sydney. In an immersive discussion, an interdisciplinary panel of artists, creatives and thinkers explored the concept of the space in between. They considered a range of areas, including the value of arts and creativity across time, industries and society, ethical navigation of change, the role of technology in shaping diverse identities, and reshaping the relationship between arts engagement and creation. Similar to the workshop we've got planned for this evening, we also delivered a Designing Futures workshop in partnership with Relative Creative. We brought together artists and people from other industries, including science, education, technology, law, business and medicine, to explore how disruption might be navigated and what roles artists and creatives might play in possible futures. Working in small teams, the participants developed different narratives and futures. They developed a range of themes, including that although tools of creativity might change with new technology, the role of the arts will remain in reminding us of what it means to be human and that we are connected social beings. A further theme was about the critical role of creatives in enabling us to think differently about new order, generating creative solutions to the big challenges like health, technology, government, protection, shelter, and the environment. Creative solutions that find new ways to value people and the planet, to be more equitable, to prevent waste, and to develop new economies of exchange. A further theme suggested the potential of creatives in increasing levels of empathy in society, to increase sharing and equity, highlighting how the creative community can paint visions of these new and equitable futures. The final group highlighted the potential of community-based cooperatives with artists and creatives enmeshed within to give localised economies greater resilience. Beyond these workshops and discussions, our Arts Futures research projects cover a wide range of topics. We're working in partnership with the Sydney Opera House to explore their work with schools through their Creative Leadership in Learning programme. This programme supports the professional learning of teachers around how to embrace creativity within their teaching practice. It also places teaching artists in the classroom to work with teachers and students on creative projects, and it culminates with performances by the students at the Sydney Opera House. We're interested in this programme both to understand the impact of what the Opera House is achieving with the individual schools, but also to understand the implications of this innovative business model and what implications it might have for other cultural organisations. We're currently in the analysis and writing stage of this research, so I'm not quite able to share concrete findings with you at the moment, but I think I can safely say that we're seeing this programme having a wide range of impacts on the teachers, students and families involved. It's encouraging greater collaboration, reflection, risk-taking and trust, as well as increased creativity. In many cases, it's enabling transformative action within schools, fueled by a focus on creativity. And beyond the impact within the school, the programme is enabling the Opera House to move beyond a traditional transactional school excursion model to building deeper relationships with schools and families. This enables a sense of belonging to the house, probably Australia's most iconic venue, and connects with ideas of identity and belonging to a community and a place. We're also in a collaborative research project with RMIT University, the Australian Film, Television and Radio School, and Screen Australia, exploring applications of autonomous digital technologies in the arts and creative industries. This work connects with the growing recognition that these technologies, such as blockchain, could potentially play a role in addressing some of the ongoing challenges faced by those in the arts and creative industries. For example, ensuring fair remuneration and protecting intellectual property for artists and creatives. A third Arts Futures research project is in partnership with Queensland University of Technology. It's exploring the role and value of interdisciplinary work-integrated learning for creative industry students and industry organisations. We're looking to understand the perceptions of the skills needed to work in the creative industries and how industry-based experience can support students to develop these skills. We're also looking at the benefits to industry partners and the challenges of working in this way. We're currently in the middle of data collection and analysis and planning ahead as to how we're going to share the research findings. We want to make sure that the findings are as accessible and useful to the industry partners and students as possible. So we're looking at ideas like using personas and sharing through workshops and web-based content. The final research project that I'd like to highlight is called Artists Navigating Change. So far, this has primarily been a literature review, drawing together research and information on how the role of artists and creatives have changed over time in combination with significant disruptions such as the Industrial Revolutions. This research project poses the core question: in a world undergoing profound disruption, how can we learn from the past to understand the present and create stronger arts futures? Through this research, we can see changing ideas of how we define concepts such as art, craft, and the artist, and how this is influenced by the socio-cultural, political, and economic context of the day. So, for example, from ancient civilizations through to the Middle Ages, the dominant type of artist or creative was the artisan, someone who was skilled in the traditional ways of an individual craft, who learned through apprenticeship, who was often anonymous, with the materials they used and the powerful elites who commissioned them more closely associated with their work than the individual artisan. This concept of a creative or artist then changes over time with influences such as the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolutions until we reach a point post-World War II where we can see the artist or creative defined as a professional, university educated, working in a specific art form with technique developed and honed over time and often supported by public and philanthropic grants and seen as contributing to nation rebuilding. And then following the fourth industrial revolution, we're currently seeing what we're describing as creative entrepreneurs. So these are creatives engaged in continuous learning to stay employable, having a range of meta competencies specific to their art forms and wider entrepreneurial skills, generating income from a wide range of sources, including grants, arts-based employment, non-arts work, patronage, now often mediated by new technologies such as Patreon, and family support. And we can start to trace the historical roots of the situation we're currently in, with institutionalized support systems, economic pressures to have portfolio careers, expectations of interdisciplinary working, and the need for artists to navigate new and emerging technologies. No wonder there's a sense of uncertainty in the sector. Artists navigating change is not meant to be an exhaustive art history. We've only been able to trace this narrative through one particular worldview so far, but it is beginning to give us some shared language and concepts to explore how things have changed and to imagine what could come next. Our next steps for this research are to build in more voices and narratives before sharing it more widely with the sector to encourage discussion, debate, and collaboration around our preferred futures. So I hope I've given you some insight into the themes and questions underpinning our Arts Futures work. If you'd like to explore more, our Arts Futures website includes research findings, event transcripts, recordings, and much, much more. And I'd just like to finish up by suggesting a few questions to guide the conversation that's going to follow. Firstly, for us, the key challenges or disruptions for the Australian cultural sector and actually for broader Australian society are around technology, ethics, community cohesion, the importance of the human in a machine-dominated world, growing interdisciplinarity, and a need for new business models. I'm really keen to understand if this holds true for Singapore in the same way. And secondly, how are cultural organisations changing in Singapore? What roles do these organisations play? What roles could or should they play in the future? And similarly, for individual artists and creatives, what roles do they have in Singaporean culture? How is this changing? What could their future be? And finally, a really important part of the Arts Futures work is generating conversations within the arts and cultural sector and encouraging conversations with other sectors so that we can imagine and create shared futures. Is this kind of activity happening in Singapore? Who's leading the way? If not, who could and how? Thanks very much.
this point, I'd like to call on our two local speakers to join me. I've rearranged the main provocations, and we have some follow-up questions as well relating to the main frames, and we will flash the first question in a second. So I would like to start the conversation actually with the role of cultural organizations, how these are changing in Singapore, and what roles they could or should play in the future. And firstly, I would like to ask Yvonne. Hello.
I'll use the mic.
Yeah, and then I'll give you the follow-up question as well, and then you can do the whole thing.
This question is quite broad. It says organizations in the plural, so I think I'll just speak for Esplanade. Yeah. I think there are roles that don't change over time, and that's because it's culture, right? So essentially for the Esplanade, how we look at our vision, when it was 20 years ago, when well, maybe not 20, 17 years ago we opened, the vision was to be essential for everyone. You know, that hasn't changed. And I don't think that sense that we want to be an art center that embraces every aspect of society or the broad diversity of communities that exist here, that hasn't changed. What does change is how we get there. Obviously, as you know, what's been shared by the speaker, how society functions has changed. So maybe I'll outline a couple of things. For the Esplanade, we've always been presenting. You know, we talked about the Sydney Opera House and that conversation moving from being a presentation one to one that's a lot more engaged with the communities that you're working in. In some ways, it is true. I mean, the Esplanade has been presenting from day one. We've also been making new work from day one, but not as intensely as I think in the last maybe 5 to 6 years. We've been either directly producing or co-producing or commissioning or co-commissioning with a variety of partners. And I think it's in response to several things. One, where we have directly produced is recognizing that despite the 20 years of professional arts organizations that have formed in Singapore because of Renaissance City funding, there are still some gaps. For instance, children's theatre. I struggle to think of, there are not many children's theatre companies that exist, right? So we produce in the area of work for very young audiences. We also recognize, over the last couple of years, there were, we've got very stable, I use theatre as an example first. There are a lot of very stable theatre companies, but we also saw that there was a lot of independent theatre makers emerging. They weren't forming companies. I think young people tend not to want to do that. At least not formal companies, maybe working as collectives, etc. And so our role in producing is also in supporting this group of independents. But we've also been commissioning more in response to not just the maturity of things here, but also what's been happening around the region. As we first opened in 2002 and what's today, it's vastly different. What's been happening in wider Asia, so South Asia, East Asia, but also within Southeast Asia and the receptivity of the rest of the world to what's happening in Asia. So a lot of that commissioning is in some ways in response to the 17 years of networking and people actually wanting to make work, and us as an art center saying, as a national art center, we have to be at the forefront of making work with artists, but also with our regional international collaborators. So I'll give these as just kind of examples of how it's changed. The second bit where cultural organizations, or rather the Esplanade, has been changing over the last 5 years. I don't know, some of you may have, this room has a mix of, there are people here who's probably my age, so I think it makes sense. You remember the old websites of even a national art center like the Esplanade was really clunky. And it's only just changed in 5 years ago. It's very, very recent. The thinking about how we transact, but also how we present, well, going beyond transaction, because right now it's also about what kinds of content are being made for a digital platform. It's not just, you take a recording of a live performance and you put that online, but, made for digital content. And there's a lot more thinking in the last 5 years about how we reach new audiences and how we engage with new audiences. And I think that point about participation is particularly true because on many of these platforms, it's not a one-way traffic. People are commenting, people are wanting to make things with you, they want to interact with the Art Centre, not just physically, obviously at the centre itself, but also through all the ways of, all the modes of communication, and social media being just one of them. And so I think we are launching or have launched, we've soft-launched a platform called offstage.sg. You can go look at it. And basically we've been steadily creating content over the last 3 years online. And then we've decided to put that together. We're slowly opening up an archive. Center 42 has an archive as well. And I think the big question we asked for ourselves was, what does it mean to be a digital art center that complements kind of a national art center? And in this day and age where so much happens digitally, also what does it mean when somebody does appear physically at your venue? What is then the experience that they have? What do they learn about themselves, and what do they learn about community, and what do they learn about society? So that brings me to the third area, which is another big question for cultural organizations, is our social role. I don't think we've ever stopped asking that, but it's become increasingly urgent. The practices that we have at an art center have changed. Very simple things like superficial things. For instance, different sets of house rules. Right? In the past, there was one set of house rules. You come to a concert, you behave like this. But recognizing the diversity of practices in society, over the last couple of years, we just kind of messed up our house rules, if you will. Every performance is different. Being a lot more inclusive, rethinking just the architecture of the building. It was built and designed in 1997, in the late 90s. So you can imagine the tons of steps. Some parts of this building are just not easily accessible. But society has changed. So in some ways, it's also revisiting what the center says about itself when people of different backgrounds come to visit that center. The rules we set actually, in some ways, I like to think when somebody walks in the art center, they think this is how a community or society should be. So how we treat each other in the theater, in its public spaces, it must inspire. It must make someone go, yeah, I think this is how I want every single public space to be like. So in some ways, thinking ahead for us as an art center, there's that broader social role. Obviously, in more interventive areas, be it education, be it working with a growing kind of aging population, young people who are facing new challenges, social challenges, mental health issues, different forms of different vulnerable communities within society. Those things are, I think, for the Art Center, for us at least, we are wanting not just to be creating projects with artists, and we've been doing that over the last 10 years. The bigger question is, what can we do to give voice to some of socially engaged work? There are many organizations already doing that, but again, as an art center, we can't just practice, we also have to think about our role as advocates. So I think that's going to shift. So three things, obviously technology and all that stuff, social impact, and the whole idea of what the Art Center does to make new work in today's context, and Singapore in the context of a broader region as well.
Thank you, Yvonne. So yes, while many things are not changing, one changes from the shift of from being only a presenting organization to that with a more deeper community engagement and relationship between the audience and the space. And Shima, hello. Conversely, for very young, I think Prismo was founded in 2017, right? Contemporary dance collective. What role does it presently play in the arts ecosystem of Singapore? And how do you see that changing in the future? How do you engage with your local community and internationally as well, if that's already happening?
Thank you. I think just writing off what Yvonne was sharing about vision, I think for Prisma we do have that opportunity to consolidate what we are doing and also transform our vision in a way that fits the desires of the associates and artists. Maybe also because we are a very small team, and maybe also because we're not a center, so we do not have to consider nationalistic ideals, but we do form a sort of like more transformative engine. And at this state where we are at a good juncture where we are almost ending our seed grant sort of funding from the Arts Council, and this is a very timely conversation because many people are interested in knowing the future of where we're going to be. And actually I have a little, I do tease my associates. We have 14 associates at the moment, 5 managers. Everyone is participating as a part-time artist, also because I'm very candid to share that I'm not able to pay you a full-time fee because most of them are graduates. They are also diploma students, also graduates in their own way, and some of them are even negotiating a full-time job. So I'm very clear as a manager of the company to also be very candid and transparent with where the money and operating costs are. And I think one thing that does help us to think about our role then will be to also unlearn what we are doing within the arts ecosystem. And this poses a bit of a challenge to most, I guess, players who are who have been in the industry for a long time, because we do have a lot of conversations about and research and surveys of how arts companies, dance companies are already functioning within Singapore. And then we start thinking about what goes on. And I guess the story of the ashram cat, I think if some of us are aware of it, like basically the story of the ashram cat is that there's a leader who tied his cat when he was not feeling well on that night, and then the next day someone came in and saw the cat being tied up. And so the tradition goes that every time when there's a religious prayer or rite, a cat has to be tied up. So in a way, as a traditional practitioner, and my base training is in tradition, so we are finding the ashram cats within the ecosystem. Like, why do we do festivals in a certain way? Why does productions always have to be only within Singapore and then it just dies there? Can we map certain conversations within the region before even processing a dance work? Can we find funds first before even negotiating a contract with artists? So I personally see Prisma as a movement, to be very honest, beyond just dance making, but I think the conversation, and also maybe because we are small, so there is a kind of like, if you don't ask, or there's always a why not, like why not? Like why not we have tickets that also encompass audiences being part of the process? Why not have tickets also them coming in, interrogating or critiquing from the very beginning? Why do we then advocate a transaction that only allows people to come in, pay, and then leave? You know, what kind of transactional relationships can we change as a small company? So these are the kind of things that we try and we play with, and then I think reflecting on it and sharing with other companies, I think that could be something. And I mean, Singapore is really small, so I think we subconsciously also sort of take in and reassess other companies' systems that they are doing and have that kind of conversations. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And now it's time to test technology. Ruth, did you hear everything they said?
I heard most of it, I think. There was a few bits I lost, but I think I got the gist of it. It's different context and how the scale of organisations can enable and train. Sorry, can you hear?
No, you're breaking up.
You're breaking up a bit.
Oh,
Just a little
sorry.
bit.
I'll just keep going and hopefully you'll catch most of it.
Well,
Tell me if it's comparable. So
go
it's
for it.
really interesting to hear how the different scale of organisation train, what those organisations can do. The technology and social common.
Ruth, I think there's something going on. Maybe you hold the thought, and maybe the internet will get stronger. or and then voice, yeah.
Just voice.
Let's take a
This way.
Thanks, Anne. Let's try that. Why don't we, in the meantime, move on to the next question? Ruth, I'm sure you can hear us. Could you hold your thoughts about the cultural organizations bit, and then we'll come back to you, because the next question is almost the same, but individuals, right? So, if you can flash the second. Okay. So the second bit is for individual artists and creative. What role do they have in Singaporean culture? Same thing. How is it changing, and what could their future be? But in addition, for Yvonne, in the context of Esplanade, if I could ask, if you could tell us, share how many staff does Esplanade have? What is the composition, like freelance, full-time, part-time? What is the ratio between creative roles and non-creative roles? And do you see that Esplanade in future will recruit a different kind of profile of individuals that work with you? Yeah, basically
We're
that.
about 260. You need the mic. You need it, right? Sorry. We're about 260. What's your? What else is there? 260 full time. 260 full time. That's largely because we program about 70% of what's happening at Centre. We program a lot of non-ticketed activities. And there is a technical team that then supports the running of Centre. Many artists don't realize and don't know this, but anybody who runs a building, a mall or a hotel will tell you that there's a whole lot of engineering behind the building. So actually, you know, there are people who are just pure technical people. They're not even technical for the stage. They are engineers that are keeping the air cons and fundamental things of the actual building going. Housekeeping, front of house. But we also do work with a large casual pool, and I don't know if there are any here, but we have maybe about 300 people, 300 to 400 people on our casual payroll, and they come in for projects. They are largely artist liaison. You can have really, well, you have your own time, and you can have a nice career being an artist liaison officer. Many of our ushers, that include students to retirees, people who hold day jobs. I do not know how they find the energy to come and be an usher, and people who are like professional ushers. They just usher for the Esplanade, and they usher for MES, and they usher for all the other venues. And the third group of casuals that we have are technical casuals. Everyone, I think, I hope, is creative. So I don't know how you draw that line. I hope everyone's creative. Although we are a large organization, kind of saying, you know, partly because I'm a new CEO, right? So I get the chance to say things like, gotta do things differently, you know, they expect it from me anyway. So it's a good opportunity for me to say, no, let's rethink this, you know. So while it's 260, actually, for this organization to function, it's just many teams that are empowered in their own right to run, to operate. And the Art Centre functions because all these teams have one purpose. And when we are doing a festival or a production, everybody's on the same page. We're always communicating, non-stop. We're always talking. If we don't write an email, we don't write an email. We talk. We pick up the phone, or we just see someone face to face. So that's the nature of the organization. I hope it remains creative. We work with a lot of artists. you know, and some of you maybe are also folks who then become our lighting designers for productions that we produce, but also we present artists.
Yeah, actually, in my intro, when I gave some statistics, these research works have definitions of arts and cultural professionals and creative professionals in the arts and culture sector. But again, as Ruth said in her presentation, creative thinking and being creative is actually not just for arts people or people in our sector, but that what makes us evolve as human beings. And I think that has resonated also in your response. Is Ruth back?
You asked the question whether things will change in terms of the profile of people.
Yeah, in the future.
I don't think so. It's not about profile. I think it's just about folks with passion, purpose, and if it's all aligned, you know, I don't think the profile changes. Of course, the profile has changed insofar as Singapore society has changed. So we got a lot more older people now. When Esplanade first opened, everybody was in their 20s. You know, they've grown up with it. You know, so we have people now in their 40s and 50s in the organization. So we have a wider range, and it really just reflects. Our older staff is 80, I think 82. So yeah, he was in the car park, and he was around at the construction site. You know, so it's got that huge diversity, and I think if we purpose to be a center for everyone, then the nature of the organization must reflect the diversity and nature of society. Otherwise, you know, yeah, it doesn't work.
Thank you, Yvonne. Hello, Ruth. Would you like to pick up on your broken sentence a little bit earlier?
Yeah, is that better in terms of audio?
Yes, much better.
Great. I think if I just reflect on what we just heard from Yvonne, I think that that kind of changing diversity within the sector, that's something that we're really interested in as one of our research priorities, and we've got a lot of work coming out over the next 12 to 18 months that's looking at diversity in the sector. And it's something that we also work on through our capacity building work, so looking at increasing engagement, increasing leadership from a diverse range of participants who are active in the arts field. So that's something that we're really interested in and focusing on within our research and our capacity building work here in Australia.
So it's been said in Ruth's presentation, and which I also kind of referenced in the intro, that just to pick up on the whole creative sector, cultural professionals, in various researches, it's been concluded that it's less likely to be automated. People who have social skills, EQ, and so on. And how do you feel about this? Do you agree? Does that make you hopeful as someone from our sector? And how do you see that in your future that's about to come? And do you plan working with other sectors and all the whole interdisciplinary aspect of things, getting out just an art silo into like a much larger horizon, so to speak? What are your thoughts?
Actually, honestly, I think it's already happening. And I think it's also, I guess, it's just a human response of survival. Because currently in Singapore, and also within Prisma itself, we do have, I guess, we call ourselves like awkward individuals, or the in-between, people who are negotiating a part-time job, a full-time job. And also, honestly, our artistic director, Ms Adam, he is somebody who is the only full-time paid professional within the company, but he also does not officially have a professional certification in dance. And so many people have a problem with that, to be very honest. And therefore we negotiate in a way, and we put forth this question to, I guess, people who are working with us, like, what is professional now? And can we still negotiate that artists have to have this sort of certification, or are we talking about experience and also the artwork that accompanies their practice? Primarily also because me and Nurhaiza Adam, both of us are practitioners in Malay traditional dance. And in Singapore, we do not have certification and an institute that, I guess, certifies our professionalism and our dance knowledge. So with that, where do traditional practitioners turn to? How do we then credify their artistic practice? So because of where we started and what we are doing about what we are now, we then create this company, therefore, is really in the in-between of the conversations at the moment. And talking about how, I guess, the multiple hats, it is pretty important, I guess, for in our practice to also allow for the associates themselves to express their interest in other things as compared to just engaging them for performances. So we do have opportunities for them to be documentarians. That means being embedded within the research process of the work. They come in for rehearsals to record conversations, to ask difficult questions, and then this becomes a sort of engagement or a go-to for people to engage with the work even before it's being done. So I guess we open up for possibilities where artists can think about how they can contribute in the discourse of art making, as compared to just, okay, I'm just performing, and then when it's done, we celebrate, and then we go off and decide another life. So I think this multiplicity of roles, it's very integral because in a way, we need to sort of map out how the engagement of art is beyond just the transaction of just watching and leaving. How can we think of it and partner with stakeholders? If you're really bringing about a social issue, for example, if we are really thinking about space, public and private, what are we talking about it, then we can map out who are also interested about it. So, like for example, we have a current strand of conversation with education stakeholders about internship. And I guess I came in with a sort of, okay, what is internship and why do we need internship? Is it really just to cover hours, or what can we do for interns or young artists? What do they need from us? So not more so that I'm just asking them to come over to clean my studio, but what are the possibilities of them creating something? So we have a program called the Permisi Open Stage where any works can be staged. So then they become a contributor for that and increase their art making prospects, and I guess maybe also just triggering that passion early. So in a way I feel that there is this multiplicity of roles because as artists we do not only want to think about just creating products or just, sometimes I call it like shampoo, we're not selling shampoo, but we're thinking about the experience of using that shampoo and probably triggering about creating other types of shampoo. I mean, I use this sort of visuals to just make it more fun for them. But yeah, this kind of things is important. And I guess maybe talking about income and the declining income, we do have to consider how then, in the terms of budgeting, we can introduce other roles embedded. I think Haizat was just talking the other day about, can we have like a gym or fitness instructor budgeted within our programs? Because that's what Hollywood movies do, right? They have trainers to train the artists, you know, but why don't we have that within? So I guess it might sound a little bit like over the top, but I guess these are the questions that we should allow within our discussion, because actually that's quite right. If we can factor in a residency within a program, that will be so much better, and then I guess the quality of the delivery would not be just a one weekend of shows, but more so an exhibition of how this work has accumulated to. So it does go back to the artist to consider and map out what is it that they need, and for that to be very succinct, the artist will also need to know what are the roles that they can play and what are the friendships that they can map out within an ideation or within a desire to create a dance work. Yeah, I think that will create a longevity of that process. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Actually, in the beginning, it was one of the premises that the ground realities of the art sector is that you're forced to put on multiple hats, or you're forced to take on many roles because of limited income or declining income. However, it's actually, it opens up to more creative creations because of that sort of grounding that is so-called forced within you. Very happy to hear these examples that you've given. Would you like to weigh in on some comments?
Yeah, let me know if you can't hear. I think I heard Hasyimah start with saying that change is happening now. Like we're kind of having this future now, and we're having to embrace it. And I think that's something that we're seeing here in Australia, and we're seeing in our research that although we're talking about the future, we're actually talking about artistic practice and the experience of artists today and how they're having to adapt to these different circumstances. So although it's art's futures, it's kind of, it's today's experience. And the way you were talking about engagement and kind of who performs and who creates and who's the audience, that's something that we're really interested in, and interested in how technology can mediate that. And we've currently got our National Arts Participation Surveys out in the field, and there's a lot more in it this year about technology and how people are engaging with arts and creativity through technology. And we're interested in this blurring of how who creates and how the tools of creativity are kind of available to everybody online, and the ways to share your artistic practice through these amazing online platforms. So how is that blurring and changing how you define an artist and how you define audience? So they're things that we don't have answers, things that we're exploring here in Australia, definitely.
Art, present, future. If we go to the next, third question. So this was actually Ruth's very first provocation at the end of her video presentation. The key challenges and disruption in the Australian context revolved around technology, ethics, community cohesion, the importance of the human and the machine-dominated world, and growing interdisciplinarity and the need for new and fresh business models. Are these the same challenges or disruptions that we are seeing in Singapore today? And yeah, same for both of you. Hear your thoughts on that. I don't have one more narrower follow-up question.
Well, I touched a bit about technology already. Any other disruptions? Well, I think Esplanade perhaps was very lucky because when the government first created it, it already thought of it as having multiple roles, right? It wasn't just a theatre, it had a mall. At the time, the 90s, it was like, oh no, not another mall, why is it that Singapore has? But in today's context, so many art centres are built, new art centres are built this way, with integrated facilities. The MRT coming right through, public spaces, gardens, they are built as part of art centres. So I must say, in some ways, we were very lucky that the planners for the Esplanade were forward-looking. And now that I'm at the centre, I'm very happy for the mall tenants. They are our single largest source of income. The truth is that arts is embedded in how people spend their leisure time, but at the same time, food is embedded in somebody's experience of the arts, right? So that the business model for the Esplanade, we were quite lucky that although we are a charity, not-for-profit, at the very start, there were these commercial income sources that was already built in. So we are a landlord, technically. Right? What I think has changed or will change is in the first couple of years, it was very much about Esplanade as a destination. You come to the center, but we know how it's increasingly difficult to get anyone to leave their homes. So the two things are how you get into somebody's home via the mobile phone, but also I think a challenge which we resisted for many years, which was will we be doing stuff outside of the art center? I think we will have to encounter that question soon. What you shared about Sydney Opera House is exactly the same thing that we are in conversation about, which is how do we work with artists, not independently, it could be never do anything in the book. It's always with artists. How do we take artists into schools with us? We already do that in various communities, particularly working with seniors or families in more vulnerable situations. So we already do that in those situations. But we're finding that it's increasingly hard to get young children out, and that's because the teachers themselves are really busy. So, and for many people, the whole idea of pop-ups they're so used to it. So being a destination is no longer an advantage for us. You know, in some ways, in a very disparate and fragmented world. So I suspect we'll have to rethink what it means to be an art center beyond our four walls, be it digitally, as well as will we partner artists for new ways of engaging communities outside the art center.
Sheila, same question, but also, you already mentioned it earlier about the Prisma, your seed grant from the NAC is about to end next year, early next year. And then, I guess on top of that, for a question on sustainability, what is, with all this in the Australian context, would funding one of the key challenges, disruption, of course, right? And then what would be your strategy for addressing that?
So for us, we are lucky because we have our board members, pretty much two which are from the non-private sector and one from the private sector. So Mr. Amir Ali, which is the Muslim Kidney Action Association President, Mr. Zaid Tahir from NUS Tan Son Song AD, and Mr. Dale Cook, who is CEO of a mining, he's a mining lord basically. So I think right now the conversation is a lot about, but of course then my artistic director, Nur Haizat Adam, also has his own philosophy and approach of what he feels will be something that he will want to participate in the next few years of Prisma. At the moment, the current conversation is a lot about taking time to consolidate what we have done, because I think we're just sharing with her that the productivity wheel in Singapore can be quite blinding, and numbers can also give us a false sense of hope. And I feel that negotiating health physically and mentally, we do need to also take time to consider the vision and the mission of the company and whether there needs to be another way of doing things, because we are primarily funded for operational costs with the SID grant, and that operational cost does not truly reflect the time and efforts of everybody within the ecosystem. So fundraising has been really challenging for an emerging dance company, and I think that's a common sort of conversations that dance companies have, like how do we get support from the private sector, and also how do we create a sort of sharing of resources, a sharing model of knowledge. But I think I hold dearly to a common phrase about how arts can save lives and how arts and humanity does make us really stand out from robots and automated items. I think that there needs to be a sense of honesty about the way we work and the way we collaborate. And I think that's what makes us different, because sometimes, there have been conversations about how people only work with people that they like. And I think I do have, I guess, informal conversations with many people about it. And I think that's actually really makes us different from robots, that we do know, we look into the person's eye, we feel their heartstrings, we know what makes them wake up in the morning, gives them fuel to live their life and breathe the next day. And I think that's something that as a manager and as a practitioner, I feel that we can have more conversations about that, like how do you foresee a human to be in in like 10 years? What does a human being need? And also as an educator myself, I do work with young children in schools. And you realize that even the Ministry of Education in Singapore has also done great paramount changes with assessment. We've also thinking about how there's also an increase of suicide cases of young children. So we now know that artists now do not only need to live and breathe their artistic vision, but we must also consider how we can save lives with our art making. So then this just gives us a bit more hope to go into the private sector and like, hey guys, health and wellness is something that we need to think about, and I guess disciplinary cases can also be healed through art making, but we do need people who are skilled and capable to do this. So that's where the capability and development of artists has to come in. So I feel that there is this fear about the future. Like I still have concerns. If I have a project with children in Petape's children's home, I can't just send an artist like that. I have to do a HT with them to consider, is this something that you need in your artistic practice? If it's not, it's fine. It's fine. You don't have to be forced to be here, because I do feel that the energy and the aura that you bring in speaks more loudly than what you do with your body sometimes and what you say. So I guess in this way, I'm always asking an artist to think about what really makes them feel alive, and then go with their instinct. And also I think that's where we are now, like what makes Prisma, what gaps do we cater to, and how do we focus on that as compared to doing everything? Yeah, because we do have conversation at Prisma is doing everything. You're doing children, you're doing adults, you're doing elderly, you know, what are you doing actually? But I feel that the conversation could be, what kind of philosophy, what kind of difficult questions are we asking through our works, and then scaling it to more that. So maybe, I guess for you and your question would really be for us to really consolidate and be a more reflective practitioner, a manager, anybody within the ecosystem. I think that is very integral now, because we really need it for our lives. Yeah.
Did any of the responses come up in your like sort of field work when these sort of Australian disruptions were
Absolutely, there's a lot that resonates in what you both just talked about. I really liked the way that Yvonne was talking about going from being a destination to having to think about how to engage in new ways and reaching out into different places virtually and in real life, virtually and really. And some of our tourism research has been looking at how Australians and international visitors are engaging with artistic output, both within cities, but also how that's spreading regionally, and it's showing that it's really important within regional parts of Australia. And some of these areas are dealing with major economic challenges and environmental challenges like drought, and we've got severe bushfire season at the moment. And the arts are really helping to open up economic activity in some of these areas and reaching out beyond the major cities. There's a really interesting project where some enormous grain silos have been painted up with these really beautiful murals, and it's produced this trail of artistic activity, which is attracting lots of visitors, which is bringing lots of economic activity into these some of these really small, remote and struggling places. And then really interesting to think about that kind of the physical and mental health aspects of the art sector, and there's lots of concern within the art sector here about artists and their well-being. And this idea of art saving lives, and this, the impact that arts can have through the Opera House project and through other research that we know of that's going on about arts in education. We're really seeing the power of creativity in arts and the way that can impact on
individual students and teachers as well, on their confidence, on their sense of self, of them having new role models where they might never have engaged with an artist before, and it opens up a whole new world. And there's an interesting there can be some interesting kind of cultural connections as well, people who, students who are coming from different backgrounds, who are able to see people from their own community in leadership and dynamic, creative roles. It produces new role model opportunities. So that power of arts and creativity is something we're definitely seeing in our research here. And we're just launching a partnership with some work with New Zealand, which is looking at the impacts of arts and how that can support well-being. So there'll be future work coming from us in partnership with New Zealand looking at these kind of issues.
Thank you. And if we can go to the next slide. This is actually the last slide, but it's a very loaded question. Yes, I think so. Yeah. So what the fourth provocation from Ruth's video is the point of arts future is to generate conversations within the arts and encouraging conversations with other sectors so we can imagine and create shared futures. I think the question was, is this happening in Singapore? If yes, who is leading the way? If not, who could lead the way? And on top of that, I'd also like to ask both of you, do you think, because you would have different points of view probably, do you think that there is adequate support or collaboration between the arts sector, the public sector, the private sector? What improvements in cultural policy, frameworks and infrastructure is, needed? And what kind of protection is probably also more needed to improve and establish, like, let's say, the value of arts and artists in society. Maybe it's proper remuneration, but other forms as well. Yes. It's big.
I would like to say that the artist always leads the way. And that must be the power of the artist, right? And for us to then work with artists is to be able to respond and ride on those energies, amplify it. Because,
Well, obviously artists, may not always be in the position of financial or political power or whatever it may be, but artists have great artistic power, right? And art centers therefore then work with artists to amplify that in a social context or whatever. And the role of, I take it, the Arts Council, universities is to amplify that from an intellectual and a policy context. So, but it must start with the artists. If not, we are deluded, I think. We think, right? Otherwise, why? So you're the key man here.
I think I just had a meeting with one of the programs manager in Esplanade, and I think we were talking about possibility of partnering with Esplanade for a possible project. I think one thing that really touched my heart was that the manager that was with us, she came in with with an approach of like, what do you need and how can we work together? And more so thinking about how mapping, I guess, thinking about bringing the ideation regionally and the partners that they have. So I guess maybe then the mindset of artists should also change in a way that we don't wait. Because I do have conversations with masters of traditional dance, and especially Malay dance, who feel like we need to wait for the Esplanade to come knocking on our door and asking, like they need to look for us, we shouldn't be looking for them, So this was a conversation like 5 years ago, but now we need to live in a world where actually, you know what, you need something and I have something. We're like small puzzle pieces, and that we actually got to work together. So I guess then, just now when you mentioned about working with others, a sort of like learning how to manage relationships better and also not over-promise. I think sometimes I'm very clear with artists that you only need to say what you can and do, but do not over-promise it, because then people who are stakeholders within your ideation can get quite brutal. Yeah, so I feel that at this juncture, I think NSC has actually set up the Arts Resource Hub in August 2019, which primarily enables sustainable careers for arts freelancers. And I love this. I guess it's almost sort of validating a lot of issues that people have been bringing up in their own silos about how artists are not being paid on time, artists do not have a contract, how also then maybe major dance companies also needs to be policed about how they are paying their artists and also then other stakeholders. But I do believe that in terms of in the private sector, that the Arts Council also have cultural notes, in a way organizations that also believe in having arts and culture within their business organization facilities and structures like Maple Tree, Asia Square, and so on. So we do have engagements with them, bringing the arts, creating an anomaly in the business daily routine during lunchtime. So these sort of things are already happening. Therefore, the artists have to consider what they need and who they can partner with. So I feel that at the moment, we also need to be very, I guess we can't be a strawberry generation. We need to go out and even go out of Singapore in a way thinking, because when I went to Bora Arts, for example, yes, I guess regionally, they will be very honest to tell me that Singapore, you have so much funding, what are you whining about? You know, and then I start to realize that, hey, we do live in a world where there are different privileges for many different people, and being a minority in a minority, I do feel that that limitation does offer another lifeline of creativity, and that it will constantly be refreshing in a way, because then you start to negotiate that, yeah, I don't have this, it's all right, I'll find another way. I don't have a space. I mean, traditional dance practitioners don't have studios. We all dance outside. You know, we always dance at a void deck. You know, we started from there. So a studio space is in a way also a privilege. So let's share it, you know, so therefore we create this sharing model. Anybody can use it. So I think looking at the future, we do have to know that managers, producers, artists, we all are in need of each other, and I'm very thankful for the rise of also producers.sg and them bringing about this conversation of going to arts markets and thinking about it internationally. But I'm also thinking in terms of climate, and business cannot be as usual also. So the future is really quite vast. But I think going back to what Yvonne said, then the artists just need to know what do they need, what kind of structures, who do they primarily want to engage with. And if every artist knows what they want and what they feel they are skilled with, what kind of skills do they need? Do they need to go for capability sort of residency? Then we will be able to talk about things that matter and what kind of issues are we tackling with, quite succinctly, as opposed to like, okay, I had this work, I just want to bring it around. And then what's the impact of that? I do have a lot of anxiety when we talk about dance productions. I'm like the worst person to have in the room, because I'll be like, what's the point of having 200 people watching us dance? Is that how it's going to be like in 5 or 10 years? What do they get from it? Like, what kind of impact is it? You know, so yeah, I think it's and these are all genuinely inspired by practitioners, local practitioners themselves. So we actually ride on each other's energy. So it's not only Prisma, but I think we do have a lot of producers right now, embedded within the dance companies themselves, who are already asking these questions. Like, we cannot afford to think about only counting people who are coming to watch our shows. You know, that doesn't work anymore. You know, why do we need them here? Because in Singapore, everybody's fighting for time. Yeah. Fighting. We are like almost. I have this thing called like we call it the protected time. So everybody has to have protected time. Sunday is protected time. Use it. You know. So I think we must be very open to flesh out all these issues and work closely with everybody in the ecosystem.
Thank you very much. So I guess the answer is, as Yvonne said, the artist is leading the way in Singapore. And as Shima said, just to summarize, but he also mentioned it several times before, that actually the capacity building bit is very important, especially with the many hats and the multiple roles, as long as then we know what skills we want to improve and so on, because creative and artistic skills are actually transferable skills, applicable to other sectors, problem solving and so on. In the near future, you can be like, yes, I am an artist and I want to work in a bank and I will be very good at it because I am equipped. And 5 minutes to go. And I would like to end again, to close the loop with Ruth. I mean, the very strong research of Australian art centers, the core and the foundation of the conversation, as well as the workshop that will follow. And just wanted to ask as a final question. This has been going on, you've been working on it for the past 18 months. The workshop that we will do after is not the first workshop, and a lot of resources are put into research. But from the Australian Council's kind of perspective and point of view, how do you see it having a practical effect on cultural professionals in the sector, going out of kind of research findings and so on, you know, from the conceptual, some sort of abstract research level into a practical level amongst the artists and creative professionals?
Thank you. Yeah, I think one of the ways that we work is that we have a really strong feedback loop between the research that we do, the findings that we are developing, the conversations we're having in the sector, which then informs the next research. So we're making sure that we've got this really strong development of our priorities and our projects based on what we're learning from our current research and what the sector is telling us and the conversations that we're having. So we've got this really strong kind of pipeline where we're learning from what we're doing and learning from these conversations. And we've got a range of projects coming up looking at, we're about to publish a piece of work on domestic tourism I mentioned, which follows up on a piece of work on international tourism. We've got the arts participation survey underway at the moment. It's really interesting what Hasyimah was just saying about skills and understanding what artists need. So we're currently involved in a piece of work looking at the skills of comic artists and understanding how their visual storytelling skills are in demand across a whole range of sectors. So this research is going to demonstrate the ways in which artists and creatives can contribute to other sectors and take their artistic skills into other areas, and to help them then articulate not only what they need, but what they can offer and the way in which they can contribute to areas which they might perhaps not have thought about working within. Within our corporate plan, we've had a bit of a kind of a development of our priorities, and we've got this really strong focus on public value and understanding the value of and contribution of arts and creativity within the sector and beyond. And our role as an advocate is really strengthening, so that's one way that we're having a really clear impact, and we will have much more focus on over the coming months and years. And in terms of our research outputs, we're really focusing on making sure that we have our research reports, which are robust and research reports, but also we have a range of outputs which are tailored to the sector, which are very accessible, are focused on the needs and questions that are being asked within the sector to make sure that it's usable to them as advocates, but also as kind of market intelligence and helping them to understand and plan for the future, using the evidence base that we're able to provide from our research team.
But a question for you. Can you tell us a bit more about OSCO's research capabilities and capacity? It sounds like you guys do a lot. You know, earlier on we had a chat before this, and I was just saying that a lot of supposed research in Singapore is done in the context of cultural policymakers, right? Which is also OSCO's role, but it's very directed towards, I need to write a piece of policy to get more money for the arts, for instance. Therefore, I will do some form of research, but the methodology, is it publicly available? All that is not as robust, right? So it doesn't stand as a piece of research, it actually stands as a piece of kind of work towards writing of a policy. So in the case of OSCO, how big is that team? Are all your researchers in-house? Do you work with universities? Do you have long-standing relationships with universities? How much of this is kind of field interviews, and how much of that is also quantitative, longitudinal studies? I'm just very curious, because it sounds as if you're putting out chunks of research each time. That's very, very rare. We don't get that in Singapore, despite every few years we will have a big cultural policy paper, it's nicely written, but in between there's not that much research, which allows us to understand things beyond opinions, mostly opinions, I think, and whoever speaks loudest at meetings. Okay.
Yeah, we're really fortunate that research is a core kind of mandated part of our organisation. So it's not a nice to have part of the organisation. It's a core part of who we are as Australia Council. We have a team of 10 with a range of expertise, with people who are more quantitative, people more qualitative, people who've come from academia, people who've come from commercial market research. So we've got a really strong team with a wide range of skills. And we're really well integrated as a team within the kind of the broader strategic development, within the broader strategic development department, directorate within our organisation. So we're closely linked in with our policy making colleagues, we're closely linked in with our marketing communications and our arts practice directors. So research sits really centrally within the organisation. And we work in a wide range of ways. So we do deliver research in-house, and we go out into the field and do interviews, and we also commission commercial partners. So like the National Arts Participation Survey is outsourced to a commercial market research company, and they work primarily online for this year's survey. And then we also have a range of projects where we're in partnership with academics and other cultural organisations, like the partnership with the Opera House. So it really depends on the project, it depends what we're trying to achieve, depends what else we've got on in a real practical sense, depends what we can budget for. But wherever possible, it depends on the research question and what's the most appropriate, who's the best partner to work with. But we are really fortunate that we have this kind of core resource of 10 great researchers.
Thank you very much. And well, that's the end of our little Q&A. That's just 4 people. And we would like to open the floor to the audience to ask any of our speakers any questions that you may have or that I didn't ask them. You can ask them yourselves. And yeah, who would like to go first? The gentleman at the back and then the gentleman in front. I think that was all the hands I saw.
Hello, my name is Felipe. I am a lecturer at the LaSalle College of the Arts in the School of Dance and Theatre. I have a question for the speaker about the methodology of, or this literature review that you've been conducting on the history of the arts. You mentioned towards the end, there was a disclaimer in your talk that this history is not comprehensive and that there are other worldviews. I think there's something to be said around there, because actually, the figure of the artist is embedded in what you could say the first wave of globalization, and art as we know it is an agent of globalization. So historically, you can't just say the figure of the artist as it appears in the Renaissance is exclusive to the European situation, because that figure is one of the agents of globalization that is deeply connected to colonial abuse, right? So, for instance, the Medicis were one of the greatest patrons of Renaissance art. And they actually, their patronage was a way to redeem themselves because they were bankers. And banking, usurpery, is a sin. So the way they commissioned art was a way to give back to society, and the art that was commissioned by the Medicis was heavily, gold was one of the material, the prime resources. And that gold was usurped or taken from Latin America and Africa by colonial officers. So just to highlight that I don't think if you're trying to decolonize a narrative of the artist and find new ways or art's futures with this critical methodology of their other worldviews, actually the artist is one of the intersecting points in which there are no other worldviews. Whenever you speak of the artist, you're already speaking of a very colonial history of producing culture, right? So just to highlight that in the case of Southeast Asia, whenever you speak of the artist, you're already framing the narrative in an economy that is very, very, very post-colonial, right? In that sense, I think that an interesting point to highlight would be when you ask what are the futures of Singapore, what can be spoken about in the Singaporean context, indigeneity here can be an interesting point, just as much of originality is an interesting point, a powerful point in Australia, and craftsmanship, right? And circulatory beginnings of craftsmanship that, make Southeast Asia be a geocultural unit per se, without necessarily tapping on the history of the artist. I thought it was important to highlight that precisely because you gave the disclaimer, and I don't think you need the disclaimer. I think that there's so much power, so much potential in investigating the artist as an economic engine, and not as a departure to have several worldviews, but as an agent of enforcing a single worldview as part of the colonial mission. Thanks.
You want to say something, Ruth?
Yeah, that's really, really interesting feedback on it, and it's something that we're very aware of. When we embarked on this project, we knew that it could be enormous, and we knew that we had to start somewhere, and we've started with, we know that we started with a very kind of Eurocentric narrative, which is partly where an organisation like the Australia Council comes from. So it kind of connects with the organisational context in a way. For us, particularly here in Australia, the First Nations narrative and understanding that the story that we're telling has points of intersection with the First Nations story, but beyond that, there's a whole other massive narrative around First Nations arts and creativity and the embeddedness within culture, which isn't reflected in the story at all. What we wanted to do was make a start and to give us some concepts to start some conversations. So we are, when we're sharing this, and I only had a limited time to kind of give context, we're acknowledging the many limitations of what we're doing and putting it out as a starting point for a conversation. So it's really useful to hear your view on this and that feedback. That's really useful.
Thank you. Gentlemen.
Hi, my name is Paul. I'm a final year student at NAFA doing theatre. So can I have the last question, the slide? The who is to lead? Yeah, lead the way. Can I have that slide, please? Yeah, so I'd like to rephrase the question. So it's not about who, but how. Because I was writing like a list of organizations which I can go to. Like for education, it's quite clear. You have the channel to MOE. For military matters, you go to MINDEF. But for the art sector, the channel is to NEC. But what if NEC doesn't support the artists? Then it's not as straightforward for us as artists. So I really like the answer. Thank you the speakers for sharing about the artist being the champion, leading the way, and also needing and knowing who to partner with. But in my generation, arts is becoming more formalized. So I do know what I want. Because I've been through diploma, I've been through degree, I've been through the education system. I do know who to partner with, Esplanade, Prisma, private, public. I feel that as much as it's the artist's self-responsibility to lead the way, But at the same time, we also need to be aware of the political infrastructures and framework that is in the Singaporean context. Because if we can't get grants, we have to go to donations. If we can't get donations, we go fundraising. But what if we can't get any of this? It's not as clear cut for us. And as much as the artists shape the environment also shapes the artists, because these political infrastructures and framework shape the artists' minds. Like, we unknowingly practice self-censorship, and we always anticipate the future, when actually the future is now. We always think that the future is some unknown thing that we cannot control. But no, the reason why we're having this conversation today is because it is in our hands. The future is in the present. But I don't know, because as a young person myself, I struggle, and it's not about who, it's about how, because I want to learn how to be more politically aware, to engage, because I don't know how to, and I'm scared. And I feel that one way to lead the way as an artist is to be more politically aware of what's going on, because these things are real and are changing me. And in history, artists are always people who challenge the status quo. That's why we're having these conversations today. We don't want to be robotized, we don't want to be robots. We're very much human, but yeah, it is a struggle for my generation, and it's hard for us to find the vocabulary and the articulation to voice these sentiments.
And I think as the generation now, your generation, actually tougher for the younger generation now, that there's more competition, there's more choices, and sometimes more options is actually, it's paralyzing, because like how, but anyway, I shouldn't. Sorry. Would you like to react to the?
Are you asking for something, or are you making a comment? I'm just trying to see how to be helpful.
How can we be more politically aware in this day and age of information and technology?
Be more politically aware.
Yeah.
Do you want to advise?
Well, there's a couple of ways, right? I mean, as with many things, you either read, I always start with reading, and then you get involved in some way and you learn through experience, and hopefully not ones that completely destroy you. No, I mean, that is the truth, right? I mean, yeah. I think you'll be more helpful on this front.
How young are you, darling?
Final year and a half.
How young? What's your age?
Do you want me to guess? No, I'm 21 this year.
Oh, that's a nice age to be 21. I'm 30, by the way. We're like 9 years difference. 21. I know majority of my associates are at the age 21, and the oldest is currently 35. And the youngest is about 21, 22, and I do have secondary school students who also come into some sort of like mentorship with us. And I think fear is real. Yeah, I think being afraid is the best feeling. Sort of feeling like you're not stuck, feeling a little bit unsure. The uncertainty can be a source of hope also. I'm not sure. I live in this. In a life in which, like, we do, because I'm a Malay traditional dance practitioner, I do come from a community that does think of dance as a sincerity, passion project in which that you don't ask for money at all. And like, to ask for money is to then sort of like really be very disrespectful to your elderlies. So maybe because I came from that community of practice, I negotiate then that actually you have to sort of consider about then thinking of other ways to do things. So my advice would just probably be that yes, we are all, I guess the idea of a struggling artist is something that we often have in conversations. But there was one time when I had this realization that actually why I enjoy also being a struggling artist, because like Felipe mentioned, being in the intersection, having something that having this unrest in your heart, like being almost something tugging on your heartstring, is actually the core of your artistic practice? Like, why are you unsettled about something? Because if we are all so comfortable, everything is a breeze, then we might not have that sort of visceral intent in what we're doing. So my offering for you is to go there to consider what is making this feeling inside your heart, and attack it. Go straight to it. If you can do a work based on what you're feeling now. You know, gather up some engine, people all feeling the same way, pose it out to the community. Channel that in a way that it doesn't destroy you, but uplift you, and ask these difficult questions. This is my offering. And if you do get along the way, you'll find people who will genuinely be touched and also want to offer. I think sometimes I have not done the donation part for my company, also because I feel that there is a social stigma of asking for help within Singapore. You know, I mean, if you watch Spider-Man, you know, right? Even Spider-Man doesn't ask for help. And I think sometimes I fall into that also. I don't know how to ask for help. And as a practitioner, sometimes in Singapore, asking for help is a weakness. Taking time to stop getting government funding might be a weakness, you know. But then you realize that actually this is something that we need to do. That you need to ask for help. Hey, I'm in final theatre. I don't know what I'm going to do in my life. I think I want to do something with visual arts. Any visual artist wants to work with me. Let's go. It's a passion project. I'm going to say it, but I'll try to make money. Just go for it. And then see where it leads you. Because the uncertainty can be really, really quite good for us. Because in Singapore, we wake up knowing what time the MRT arrives. We know what time the bus comes. We already know where to eat. We already plan everything. And that can be quite blinding also. Yeah.
Thank you.
Andy? I know him.
Hello. So I have two comments and then one question for Ruth. But first I'd like to address like his point. So I think like, so I'm not a professional artist or anything, just a keen observer and like also someone who tries to stay engaged, watch plays, watch concerts. So like I would think as a viewer, as an audience, I want to keep seeing the artwork like being produced. So and I agree with you that you should keep going despite the difficulties, because it is not for us to judge. Like I feel that whatever artwork we produce within this constraint, it is for future academics who do study on us, who study our who study our society, because art is a reflection of the current, of the present society, right? Like Charles Dickens, like his novels. So it's through his novels that we realize that the devastation of the Industrial Revolution, for example. So yeah, so that's point number one. Point number two is about how to be more politically aware. I think like just a short comment here. I think what's missing in politics in general, not only in Singapore, is actually arts policy or cultural policy in party manifestos. So like probably I think maybe lobbying with aspiring or like aspiring young politicians. Yeah, that could be one way to lobby with this kind of people, and then include them in manifestos probably. There are politicians who are also trying to prove themselves. Yeah. So I think the third question. So going to my question, Ruth. So earlier on, you mentioned that one of the key challenges that the arts sector face in Australia is ethics. So like I'm just not very sure what it means. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that? Like, is it the ethical position of the artwork produced, or is it like the ethical compass of artists when carrying out their work? Yeah.
Yeah, I think where we're looking particularly at ethics is around new and emerging technologies. So understanding how new technologies are impacting on artists and on artistic practice, which has relevance. You know, these technologies and their ethical challenges are challenging beyond the arts sector, but we're particularly interested to understand how things like blockchain technology and things like that are playing out within the artistic sector. So that's where we're particularly looking at ethics.
Does that answer your question? Any other questions from the floor? Kathy?
Hi. So I guess this is a question about Australia, and then it also reflects on Singapore, right? So I was really struck by the statistics that Fatima shared about the fact that, you know, we are in the art sector, we earn a healthy percentage lower than the national average. And especially just in my experience, most of the people that I work with are extremely intelligent, overqualified, absolutely committed. And I'm thinking about the work of Professor Angela McRobbie. Are you familiar with her work? So she talks about how, you know, she really kind of challenges this idea of the creative industries, but she also talks about how in the arts, we are absolutely masters at self-exploitation. So, because we're self-employed, right? Most of us are, especially, you know, even if we have bigger pay masters, but, you know, we are the ones that will never think about healthcare or insurance. Over time, no one thinks about those things because we are driven by this. I mean, it's a kind of reified idea of the artist, right? Which goes back to, I think, Felipe's idea of this construction of this romantic idea of the artist who has to starve and suffer in order to make work. So yeah, so, and then again, I think what was said about the fact that it seems as if the narrative is one of adaptation for us all, for arts organizations, for artists, for everyone in the arts sector. It's about the political economy is changing, the way that we make the world is changing, and our role is to adapt. So rather than challenge the means of production, right? You know, we're a product of late capitalism, and the way that we run our arts groups and the way that we compensate ourselves, the way that we create work, reflects that. So my question really is, and I'm absolutely part of what I'm critiquing now, right? I run an arts website which, you know, so we're a critical website. We do reviews of artworks in Singapore and Southeast Asia. But yeah, where's the place of where are the means of actually looking at the way that we produce work, the relationships of power that you will have between, for example, an artistic director and a stage manager, or, you know, a stage manager, and how, I mean, why are we not talking about these structures of power rather than just adapting to the way that society is at large?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch all of that. Fatima, could you just give me a quick summary? Sorry, it dropped in and out.
Oh, the whole thing? Or the question? Oh yeah, so Kathy was saying that, you know, the existing structures of power, let's say between an artistic director and a stage manager, why are we not talking about that structure rather than just adapting to it?
Sorry, I'm sorry, I'm not catching it.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? No? Or maybe someone else would like to take it.
Does someone else want to pick it up while I'm getting a message about the question?
I think I briefly mentioned each other that we do, I guess, in the spirit of unlearning. Yeah, this is one of the things that we also talk about. Like, I think some theatre companies also have diffused it also, that they don't have a primary artistic director, and it is probably something that that we can explore. And I think in also the method, the approach of dance making, I guess that happens a lot within the creation process, where it's a bit more facilitative. The language of instruction that happens could probably be an evidence of how artists are now negotiating the power relations. That means the choreographer does not necessarily always has to dictate where the body goes, but it becomes more facilitative. But then, yeah, you are probably also questioning about then for the business model of it all, like do we then have to have an artistic director? And therefore, that's why I guess Prisma is going on to this consolidation period, because we do joke about how, like, you know, that Prisma in the future might not be primarily the same person, because in Singapore we have a tendency for everybody in a dance company to sort of look, smell, taste like the artistic director. You move like the person, you talk like the person, you're just a shadow of the person. And that is primarily a hierarchy that's also something that that also is expected in the traditional dance sector. Because then you sort of belong in a family, in a tribe, a guru and student sort of relationship. But we do joke about how, like, you know, the artistic directorship can change, and that maybe then we work in a more collective sort of setting. But then we are also being challenged by policymakers. Will they be okay to have a dance company that does not have an artistic director? Yeah, so we might test it out. You know, we might see what are the conversations that come from it. But this has not happened in Singapore before, because that is the current conversation. So yeah, I think it's something that we should be thinking about, because really the power relations just change the culture within how we work, and yeah, that's something that can be think about.
I think when people question structure and power relations, and there is a change affected to that structure, then it points to another question of legitimacy, as what you said. It's like, okay, if we change it all up, why do we need like a top guy, and then we don't have, we're just like 3 bosses or something in a collective, and then from the outside, like, oh, but are you like a legit thing or what? And so I just wanted to point that out. And I think, Ruth, you got the message about the, thanks. Would you like to?
Thank you. Yeah, it dropped out at a key moment there. Yeah, a couple of things. One thing, so thinking about in Australia, with the kind of the rise of the gig economy and the way in which it's expanding into other areas of work, we can kind of see that artists are, some of the original gig workers, kind of already adept at kind of managing and shifting and changing within their portfolio careers. So this adaptation is something that's kind of always happened and is continuing to happen in this kind of responses to these new challenges, these new disruptions. There's a lot of discussion here about the need for greater acknowledgement of the work of artists and to ensure there's fair remuneration around pay. So these conversations are happening here in Australia. And a kind of a theme around the decline in income that artists are receiving from their work is at odds with the increasing value that Australians are placing on the arts in general. There's this kind of disconnect between we have a kind of a headline figure from some of our research that 98% of Australians are engaging with the arts, and it's something that is critical to our society, and yet it's not reflected in the way in which artists are remunerated and supported by that kind of broader society. So just a couple of kind of reflections on what was said.
Thank you.
I'm from the Philippines. In the Philippines, and I'm going to ask if it's the same in Singapore. So, for instance, arts managers who work in galleries, there's no like uniform or standard pay. Of course, the posher galleries like pay more, so people want to work there. And then the more independent or midway will pay lower, but maybe people like fresh arts graduates will want to work there because of their body of work or like the character of the artwork that they show. But in Singapore, is it kind of like level grounded? Like the people who work for organizations or institutions that have similar roles kind of get similar remuneration that is not fair, is not the word, but you know, there's like kind of a standard. There's no
There's no
wage.
there's no published standard wage in Singapore.
Isn't the Arts Resource Hub doing something?
I think they're working on
right?
it, but
Are
not-
you guys doing something like that?
it's not really
Yeah,
published.
right. There's always a range. I mean, you know, my husband used to be a designer, right? So you can pay 50,000 and you can pay 5,000, but the level of skill is entirely different. So I think it's also problematic in a very skill-based, expert, experience-based that you have a fixed rate. So say a lighting designer, you probably will have a range. Someone who's fresh coming in, some, you know. But there is, I think, say in the theatre sector, because that's probably the most mature, the theatre and dance, there are ranges for stage managers, tech managers, lighting designers. I think there is a rough range, depending on also who you work with. Is this company going to get an NEC grant for it? Then the rates go up a bit more. I think that's the case. But of course, with each year, new people joining in, and I think that's something to do with NAFA and ASA and how the education landscape shapes and changes. As we have more and more young people who are kind of professionally trained, then those expectations will start to change again. And as you mentioned, it's becoming more and more challenging, I think, for a young person. Yeah. So, tendency is for young people then to either say I'll work for a lot less and therefore be exploited, and also then undermining the folks who have been in the sector for longer. So I'm still not sure how it will pan out, because it's been only maybe in more recent years that these two universities and colleges have been producing more kids, young people, not kids, young graduates, in some of these spheres. But I think a very mature creative sector would be design, and you already see that happening in design. Less so in the arts, I think.
And also, I think as we go further, into the future, like now there are courses, arts management, and all sorts of arts courses that didn't exist before. And as the gentleman said in his comment, the arts practice is becoming more and more professionalized and recognized as there was a time that, you're an artist, it's not a real job, or what is it, like a hobby or something, but now that's not the case anymore. It's becoming more and more professionalized, and I think as it does, then more protection is needed, better and stronger infrastructure, better support, and the Arts Resource Hub, which everyone has been talking about, it's quite new. It's a very good, really, resource for freelancers and arts practitioners, because it's like if you're a visual artist, for instance, probably you don't know how to invoice or how to make budgets and so on. They have resources for all of that. And I am digressing. And is there a final question, perhaps? Great.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask both Ruth, my colleague, and also panels in the room, the question about the disconnect between the number of audience that are engaged in the arts and also the reducing wage of artists. Because I think NAC also released a report last year where the numbers of events and art companies have increased in Singapore. The audiences for free events have increased in Singapore, but the audiences for ticketed event has reduced. So I guess whether there's any comments, and also Ruth, whether you also have any kind of response from an Australian point of view about the research on art participation that you're doing in Australia.
I jump in partly because I'm familiar with some of these stats, and I will say that statistics are very dangerous. And every time the Arts Council releases a report like that, I really wish they would have more narrative to go with it. In 2010, the ticket attendances were very high. The 2 IRs open, we had a huge number of musicals, your Cats, whatever. And you would see your ticket attendances hit a record high, and everything else since then has been a dip. Now, if you probably need to go down a bit further, I think that the Arts Council needs to do this, which is to break down the number of tickets sold and to really understand which category has dipped. I suspect it's dipped a lot for musicals. And it varies year on year for pop concerts, which is all in that figure as well. You know, so all these arena concerts, so when the sports hub opened with the indoor stadium, so we now have 2 venues for these big concerts. So that some of that dip may be maybe absorbed by rock concerts. Now, if you just then look at what the major companies, and I think the bulk of tickets are still sold by SSO, SCO, SDT, obviously, you know, Esplanade presents, which then reflects quite a large number of arts groups, SRT, and Pandemonium. These are your major companies within the ticketed sphere. And whether or not that gives the same picture that ticketed attendance has indeed dropped. Because, for instance, the picture at Esplanade is slightly different. You know, our ticketed attendance is more or less remain the same. It comes up and down in different years depending on what we present. The more work we do with local artists, sometimes it doesn't make that much of a dent because we do a lot of it in small studios. I think we can sell out 5 productions, it's 1,000 people. You know, and we've been doing increasingly more work with artists, Singapore artists, and they've been selling out in the theatre studios, but each time it's 245, 220, right? Because the size of the studio, are we able then to start making more mid-sized work? And that's why we're building the waterfront theatre. But I would say, look at those stats very carefully, and I think one of the, I mean, I only see Karen here from the Arts Council, don't take it personally. One of the problems for the Arts Council is it's been putting out statistics but not really understanding what narrative not really analysing it much further and much deeper. Another piece of work they do, which is quite useful because it's longitudinal over time, is it looks at attitudes of Singaporeans, whether they want to go to performances or not. And that's very minimal. And I wonder why those attitudes have been dipping. Of course, it only peaked in 2015 because it was SG50. And so when you ask a Singaporean, kind of, they do this, you know, household survey. Have you experienced or gone to an arts performance? A lot more people said yes because it was happening all around their neighborhoods. And so there was a very high level of recall, just recall. So I think those attitudes, whether or not people have been attending more, less, a lot of that is also sifted or influenced by what's in the social media, what's in the media, what are people seeing, and that is something which the Arts Council needs to study a lot more into. What is effective in Singaporeans developing that positive affinity for the arts, in recognizing that, you know, it's in their life, one way or another. And how do you shape and develop the value of that in somebody's, you know, day-to-day living? Otherwise, the stats, like you mentioned, it's tricky because then we all perpetrate this view as well that, oh, audiences are dropping, you know, and then we get really depressed and anxious about it. But is it really true? I think the council may want to say, and actually experience of different arts companies, it varies. So if you ask a company like Pandemonium, they said, no, we've just been growing, right? And so probably too hard to generalize. I think the proliferation of free activities, however, is somewhat problematic. It's maybe been a bit tempered in the last 2 years, but it does, of course, create a scene where there are so many happenings, and you generate or you cultivate an audience or a public that just desires happenings. I just need to be there, fear of missing out, right? But then there's a real lack of deeper engagement, a real lack of understanding what's the relationship between the arts and the place, or the arts and the community. So that I think that's the real danger that we step into. Not so much that it cannibalizes tickets or it undermines income only, but what kind of relationship are we really building for the public and its relationship to arts, culture, and how they see their role with public spaces. Is it just a matter of consumption of what's in or, you know, Instagrammable at the moment? Sorry, that's my long reply.
one final reply from either Ruth or Hasyimah?
Yeah, we're so sometimes the arts experiences that are available are free to those who are participating. So that is really important to be able to provide that access, but then that becomes a challenge over how you then make the economic model work to then be able to appropriately remunerate artists. So although it's a challenging situation where we want to increase accessibility, but then how do you then make that work financially? And our audience research confirms that Australians want more access, but there's this tricky relationship with their perceptions of how the arts should be funded, and there isn't necessarily the same support for increasing funding towards the arts. So although they want more access and affordable access to the arts, there isn't necessarily the kind of the follow-on relationship or assumption there that should then be publicly funded. So it's a really kind of a challenging situation that we're further exploring in our current National Arts Participation Survey. And we're also thinking here about technology and the ways in which technology can provide access to artistic output, which don't then necessarily come with paying for it. And we're still working out how, within these new technological models, how do you then protect intellectual property and protect that right to be remunerated for the work that you've created. And with these new models, we're still learning how they're working and how to make them work in a way that supports the sustainable arts sector.
Thank you very much. And on that note, we're a bit over time, so thank you. And there are some refreshments downstairs, and even if you're not staying for the workshop, it's fine. And so thank you to Center 42 and to the Australian Council for the Arts for a wonderful partnership. Yan, do you want to say something?
If you don't mind, hi, from Center 42.
Center 42.
I'll just step over here so that we can see Ruth. Just on that closing note, I just wanted to say my thanks as well. We've had 3 editions of this Unplugged session with ASEF, and with this partnership has allowed us to really touch on topics that are close to us and our community that Center 42 has. Without their support, with facilitation, with of course funding, with our international speakers, we wouldn't have been able to have these conversations because of the primary work that we do in incubation and documentation of local theatre. So this opportunity was really, we're very grateful for that, for opening up the conversations. For the 3 editions, we've actually worked with different partners. The first, we've actually worked with Producers SG to bring conversation about producers and the independent scene in Singapore. And this particular edition, I would also like to give acknowledgement to the National Arts Council. Our sector manager, Karen, actually opened up the doors for us to have access to Australian Council for the Arts, got us in contact with the work there, introduced the work to us, and that really opened up the conversation on research. And we hope that this session, with the involvement of Hasyimah and Yvonne, starts brewing further thoughts about our future in Singapore and for the role of arts and artists in Singapore. This is like a year end, so we thought maybe it's a good time to then think about what's going to happen in the new year to come and decade to come. With that, one last plug, this is also a part of a larger series of conversations. We have been quite focused in arts and technology this year, especially in Singapore. And the Arts Council, together with Esplanade, is presenting an IETM symposium on Tuesday and Wednesday, a full day of symposium and a full day of workshops. So if any of you who are interested in following up the conversation on digital technologies and especially in the performing arts sector, there's an opportunity there for further conversations. So yes, that's my thanks for today, and thanks to my team who have managed to make this trans-boundaries conversation happen. We had our fingers crossed for a couple of days. Thank you, Ruth, for being with us today. Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you, Fatima.